Eleanor Brennan's hands wouldn't stop shaking as she counted the pills. 17 bottles. Enough to end 79 years of invisible existence. She had written the note. She had unplugged the phone. She had chosen Christmas Eve because nobody would find her until after the holiday. Nobody would even notice. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the first bottle. Then 3 thunderous knocks exploded against her door. She froze. A man's voice, deep and rough, cut through the silence. "Mrs. Brennan, you shouldn't be alone tonight." A Hell's Angel stood on her doorstep, and he refused to let her die. If you want to see how this story ends, please subscribe to my channel and follow Eleanor's journey to the very last moment. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel around the world. Eleanor's hands wouldn't stop shaking. They hadn't stopped for 3 days now. Not since she'd made her decision. Not since she'd counted the pills, written the note, and accepted that 79 years was enough. She pressed her palms flat against the kitchen counter, willing them to be still. The cold formica bit into her skin, but she barely felt it. She barely felt anything anymore. "Stop it," she whispered to herself. "Just stop." The shaking continued. Eleanor looked down at the pill bottles arranged before her. Hydrocodone from her hip surgery 2 years ago. Ambien from when Walter first got sick. Xanax from the grief counselor who stopped returning her calls. 17 bottles in total collected over years of prescriptions she'd never finished. Tonight she would finish them all. The kitchen clock read 6:47 p.m. She had given herself until midnight. That seemed fitting somehow. End the day, end the year, end everything at once. Her gaze drifted to the photograph on the refrigerator. Walter's smile beamed back at her, frozen in a moment from their 45th anniversary. He was holding her close, his arm wrapped around her waist, both of them laughing at something she couldn't remember anymore. "I'm coming, Walt," she said softly. "I hope you're not too disappointed in me." The furnace rattled and coughed, then fell silent. Eleanor pulled Walter's old cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The heater had died 3 weeks ago, and she hadn't bothered to call anyone to fix it. What was the point? She wouldn't need heat where she was going. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. She'd eaten the last of the crackers yesterday. The refrigerator held nothing but a half-empty bottle of water and some expired yogurt. She'd stopped buying groceries weeks ago. The phone sat silent on the counter as it had for months. Eleanor picked it up, checking for missed calls, even though she knew there wouldn't be any. The screen was blank, no messages, no voicemails, no evidence that anyone in the world remembered she existed. She set the phone down and laughed bitterly. "Merry Christmas, Eleanor. Population 1. The letter sat on this kitchen table, written in her careful schoolteacher's handwriting. 3 drafts before she got it right. Short, simple, without blame. To whom it may concern. My name is Eleanor Marie Brennan. I am 79 years old. I was a teacher for 42 years. I was a wife for 47 years. I was a mother for 43 years. I am tired now. Please contact my son David Brennan in Sacramento, California. His number is in my address book by the phone. I'm sorry for any inconvenience this causes. Eleanor." She'd debated whether to write more, whether to explain about the loneliness that had hollowed her out like a gourd, whether to describe what it felt like to go days without hearing another human voice, whether to tell David that she'd waited by the phone every Christmas for 5 years, hoping he'd call. In the end, she decided against it. David wouldn't read it anyway. He'd hire someone to handle the arrangements, just like he'd hired someone to handle everything else from 2,000 miles away. Eleanor walked to the window and looked out at the street below. Snow was falling steadily now, blanketing the neighborhood in white. Through the frost on her window pane, she could see the houses across the street glowing with Christmas lights, families moving past windows, children laughing, lives being lived. She pressed her hand against the cold glass. Once her house had been like that. Warm, full, alive. 42 years, she said to no one. I taught other people's children for 42 years, and now I'm dying alone. The words hung in the air, stark and true. Eleanor's mind drifted to her last conversation with David. 18 months ago. She'd called him on his birthday, nervous as a schoolgirl. David, happy birthday, sweetheart. Mom. Yeah, thanks. His voice had been distracted, impatient. Look, I'm in the middle of something. Can I call you back? Of course. I just wanted to hear your voice. I miss you, David. A long pause. Then, yeah, okay. I'll call you later. He never called back. Eleanor had waited by the phone for 3 days. Then a week. Then she'd stopped counting. She'd tried calling him after that. Left messages that went unanswered, sent birthday cards that were never acknowledged. Eventually, she'd stopped trying. The rejection hurt too much. What did I do wrong? She asked Walter's photograph now. Was I that terrible a mother? The photograph didn't answer. It never did. Eleanor remembered David as a boy, 7 years old, running through the house on Christmas morning, tearing open presents with wild abandon. She remembered the macaroni necklace he'd made her in kindergarten, the one she'd worn to church every Sunday for a year. She remembered sitting beside his bed when he had the flu, reading him stories until he fell asleep. Where had that boy gone? When had she lost him? She didn't know. That was the worst part. She couldn't point to a moment, a fight, a betrayal. He'd just drifted away. Slowly over years, until she looked up one day and realized her son had become a stranger who shared her last name, but nothing else. The clock read 7:08 p.m. Eleanor shuffled back to the kitchen. Her joints ached with every step, and her bones felt brittle, like they might shatter if she moved too quickly. She'd lost so much weight in the past year that her wedding ring had slipped off her finger twice. She'd had to tape it in place. She picked up the first pill bottle and turned it over in her hands. The label was faded, the prescription date from 3 years ago. Okay, she said, her voice steady. Okay. But her hands were shaking again. She set the bottle down and gripped the counter. Her heart was racing. Not from fear she'd made peace with dying, but from something else. Something she couldn't name. Was she really going to do this? Yes. Yes, she was. Because the alternative was waking up tomorrow alone. And the day after that. And the day after that. An endless string of empty days stretching into an empty future. She couldn't do it anymore. She just couldn't. Forgive me, Walter, she whispered. Forgive me, God, but I'm so tired. She reached for the bottle again. 3 thunderous knocks exploded against her front door. Eleanor's hand froze in midair. The knocks came again, harder this time. Insistent, demanding. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No one knocked on her door. Not anymore. The last visitor she'd had was the mailman 3 months ago delivering a package meant for the neighbors. Who's there? Her voice came out thin and reedy, barely louder than a whisper. Mrs. Brennan. A man's voice. Deep. Rough. Eleanor Brennan. He knew her name. Eleanor's blood went cold. How did he know her name? Was it the police? Had someone reported something? Ma'am, I need to talk to you. It's important. She pressed her back against the counter, eyes fixed on the front door. Through the narrow window beside it, she could see a massive shape blocking the porch light. "I'm not buying anything," she called out, her voice trembling. "Please, go away." "I'm not selling anything, ma'am. I just need 5 minutes of your time." Eleanor didn't move. Her gaze darted to the phone on the counter. Should she call 911? But what would she tell them? That a man was knocking on her door on Christmas Eve. "Mrs. Brennan, please?" The voice softened slightly. "I know this seems strange, but I promise I'm not here to hurt you." "Then why are you here?" A pause. Then, "Because no one should be alone on Christmas Eve." The words hit her like a physical blow. Her knees buckled, and she grabbed the counter to keep from falling. "What? What did you say?" "I said no one should be alone tonight, and I heard you might need some company." Eleanor's hands were shaking worse than ever as she approached the door. Every instinct screamed at her to stay back, to call the police, to hide in her bedroom until the stranger went away. But something else, something deeper, pulled her forward. She pressed her eye to the peephole and gasped. The man on her porch was enormous. At least 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that seemed to span the entire doorframe. He wore a black leather jacket covered in patches, and even through the distorted lens of the peephole, she could see tattoos crawling up his neck. But it was the patch on his chest that made her stomach drop. A skull with wings. Hell's Angels. Eleanor stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth. A biker. A Hell's Angel. On her doorstep. "Ma'am," the voice came again. "I know what you're probably thinking, but I swear on my mother's grave I mean you no harm." You're a Hell's Angel." Eleanor said the words, tumbling out before she could stop them. A low chuckle. "Yes, ma'am, I am. Name's Marcus Sullivan. Most folks call me Bear." "Why are you here? What do you want from me?" "I want to invite you to Christmas Eve dinner." Eleanor blinked. Of all the things she'd expected him to say, that wasn't even on the list. "I'm sorry. What?" "Dinner, ma'am. Good food, warm fire, good people. Our club does this every year, reaches out to folks who might be spending the holiday alone. Your name came up on our list." "What list? How did you get my name?" Another pause. "Mrs. Chen down at the community center. She mentioned you hadn't been to the senior lunch program in months. Said she was worried about you." Mrs. Chen. Linda Chen, the sweet woman who ran the Wednesday lunch program Eleanor had stopped attending after Walter died. She hadn't thought about Linda in years. She remembered me. She did. Said you used to bring the best apple pie she ever tasted. Eleanor felt something crack inside her chest. Someone had remembered her. Someone had noticed. She was gone. "Mrs. Brennan." Marcus's voice was gentle now. "I know this is a lot to take in, and I know I probably look scary as hell standing out here, but I promise you I'm one of the good guys, and I'd really like it if you'd open this door." Eleanor stood frozen, one hand on the deadbolt. Open the door to a Hell's Angel. On Christmas Eve. While 17 bottles of pills waited on her kitchen counter. This was insane. This was absolutely insane. But what did she have to lose? In a few hours, she'd planned to be dead anyway. With trembling fingers, she undid the chain lock. Then the deadbolt. Then, before she could change her mind, she opened the door. Marcus Sullivan was even more imposing up close. His face was weathered and scarred, his beard streaked with gray. Tattoos covered every visible inch of skin, except his face, and his leather vest was so covered with patches and pins that it looked more like a military uniform than a jacket. But his eyes were gentle, warm, kind. They were the eyes of a man who had seen terrible things and come out the other side. "Mrs. Brennan," he said softly. "Thank you for opening the door." Eleanor realized she was holding her breath. She let it out slowly. "You're welcome. I don't know why I did." Marcus smiled. It transformed his entire face. "Sometimes we do things we can't explain. Sometimes those turn out to be the best decisions we ever make." He glanced past her into the dark apartment. His smile faded. "Ma'am, is your heat broken?" "What?" "Oh, yes. It went out a few weeks ago." "A few weeks?" His voice sharpened. "You've been living without heat for weeks in Minnesota. In December." Eleanor shrugged. "I have sweaters." Marcus's jaw tightened. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "I've got a buddy who does HVAC work. He'll be here in an hour to fix that for you." "Oh no, you don't have to. Already done." He pocketed the phone. Now, about that dinner invitation. Eleanor should have said no. She knew she should have said no. Rational people didn't accept dinner invitations from Hell's Angels, who showed up unannounced on Christmas Eve. But Eleanor was tired of being rational. She was tired of being careful. She was tired of being alone. I suppose I could come for a little while." Marcus's face broke into a genuine grin. "That's wonderful, ma'am. Truly wonderful. But first," he gestured to her thin frame, her worn cardigan, her slippers. "We need to get you warmed up, and maybe fed. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" Eleanor's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. It's been a few days." "A few days." Marcus closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, she saw something fierce burning in their depths. "Mrs. Brennan, I'm going to make you a promise right now. From this moment forward, you are not going to be hungry. You are not going to be cold. And you are not going to be alone. Do you understand me?" Eleanor's eyes welled with tears. Why do you care? You don't even know me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "Because 12 years ago, my mother died alone in a nursing home while I was serving time in prison. I didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't get to hold her hand. I didn't get to tell her I loved her one last time." He met Eleanor's gaze. "I swore on her grave that I would never let another person die alone if I could help it. That's why I'm here, Mrs. Brennan. That's why I care." Eleanor sank into this chair by her kitchen table. She couldn't look at Marcus, couldn't meet his eyes. Because if she did, she was afraid she'd break down completely. "Your mother," she said softly. "What was her name?" "Ruth. Ruth Ann Sullivan." Marcus's voice was thick. "She was a waitress for 30 years. Raised 3 kids by herself after my dad took off. She was the strongest woman I ever knew. And you were in prison when she died. Armed robbery. I was young and stupid and angry at the world. Got 15 years, served 12. He paused. "She wrote me every week for 11 years. Every single week without fail. Then one week the letter didn't come. That's how I knew." Eleanor looked up. "I'm so sorry." "Me too," Marcus straightened. "But I made something of myself after that. Turned the club around. We're not what we used to be. We protect people now. We help people." He gestured around the cold, dark apartment. "People like you." "I'm just a lonely old woman," Eleanor said. "I'm not worth helping." Marcus squatted down until he was at eye level with her. "Mrs. Brennan, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Are you listening?" She nodded. "Every single person on this earth is worth helping. Every single one. It doesn't matter if you're 80 or 18, rich or poor, famous or forgotten. You matter. Your life matters. And I will not leave this apartment until you believe that. 30 minutes later, Eleanor found herself in the passenger seat of an enormous black pickup truck, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like leather and pine. The heater blasted warm air onto her face, and for the first time in weeks, she felt something other than cold. Marcus drove carefully through the snow-covered streets, his massive hands gentle on the wheel. "Where are we going?" Eleanor asked. "Our clubhouse. It's about 15 minutes from here. The boys have been cooking all day." "The boys, my brothers, the club. We've got about 60 people coming tonight, bikers, their families, and folks like yourself who needed somewhere to be." Eleanor clutched the blanket tighter. "I don't know if I'll fit in. I don't know anything about motorcycles." Marcus laughed. "Ma'am, half the people there tonight won't know a carburetor from a catalytic converter. That's not what this is about." He glanced at her. "This is about family. The kind you choose, not the kind you're born into. Family." The word hit her like a punch to the gut. "My son doesn't call me," she heard herself say. "David. He lives in Sacramento. He hasn't called in 18 months. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. "I'm sorry." "I don't know what I did wrong. I was a good mother. I loved him. I gave him everything I had." Her voice cracked. "And now he acts like I don't exist." "Some kids are just broken that way," Marcus said quietly. "It's not your fault." "Isn't it? I must have done something." "Mrs. Brennan, can I call you Eleanor?" She nodded. "Eleanor, listen to me. Some people have a hole inside them that no amount of love can fill. They push away the people who love them most because they're scared or angry or just too damn selfish to see what they're losing. That's not your fault. That's their sickness." Eleanor wiped her eyes. "Do you really believe that? I know it. I was that person for a long time. I pushed away everyone who tried to love me." His voice dropped, including my mother. "And I'll regret that until the day I die." The clubhouse appeared through the falling snow like something out of a dream. It was a massive converted warehouse, its windows blazing with light. Christmas decorations covered every surface, wreaths, garlands, a 12-foot tree visible through the front windows. Dozens of motorcycles were parked in neat rows out front, their chrome gleaming under strings of colored lights. And people, so many people, moving past windows, gathered in doorways, laughing and talking and living. Eleanor's throat tightened. "There are so many of them." "About 60 tonight, give or take." Marcus pulled into a parking spot and killed the engine. "Ready? I don't think I can do this." "Yes, you can." He turned to face her. "Eleanor, I'm going to be right beside you the whole time. And every single person in that building is going to treat you like family. I guarantee it." "But I'm nobody. I'm just..." "You're Eleanor Marie Brennan," Marcus said firmly. "You were a teacher for 42 years. You made the best apple pie Linda Chen ever tasted. And tonight, you're our guest of honor." He opened his door. "Now come on. There are people dying to meet you." The noise hit Eleanor like a wave as Marcus led her through the front door. Laughter. Music. Dozens of voices talking over each other. The smell of roasting meat and fresh bread and pine needles. Children running between legs. Old men arguing good-naturedly over a card game. Women setting tables with enough food to feed an army. And bikers. So many bikers. Big men in leather vests, their arms covered in tattoos, their faces weathered by years of hard living. They looked like the kind of men who would scare most people senseless, but they were all smiling. A young man approached them, his face lighting up when he saw Marcus. "Bear, you made it, and you brought—" He stopped, his eyes falling on Eleanor. "Patch, this is Eleanor Brennan," Marcus said. "Eleanor, this is Patch Rodriguez. He's one of our youngest members." Patch couldn't have been more than 30. His eyes were bright and eager, and his smile was so genuine that Eleanor felt herself relaxing despite her nerves. "Brennan, it's so great to meet you." He grabbed her hand and pumped it enthusiastically. "Bear's been talking about finding you for weeks. I'm so glad you came. You've been looking for me for weeks." Eleanor turned to Marcus. He shrugged. "Linda gave me your name a month ago. Took a while to work up the courage to knock on your door." "Why? Because I was afraid you'd say no, and I really, really wanted you to say yes." The next hour passed in a blur. Eleanor was introduced to so many people that she couldn't hope to remember all their names. There was Bobby, an 84-year-old Korean War veteran who walked with a cane and told war stories that made everyone laugh. There was Betty Martinez, a retired nurse who hugged Eleanor like they'd known each other for years. There was Sam Washington, an old jazz musician who promised to play her favorite songs later. And there were the bikers. So many bikers. They shook her hand gently, called her ma'am, pulled out chairs for her, made sure her plate was full and her cup was never empty. Not one of them looked at her with pity. Not one of them made her feel like a charity case. They made her feel like family. Eleanor found herself seated at a long table surrounded by people who actually seemed interested in her life. When was the last time anyone had asked about her teaching career, about Walter, about anything? 42 years? Patch leaned forward, eyes wide. You taught elementary school for 42 years, second grade mostly, though I did a stint in fourth grade during the 80s. That's incredible. I couldn't handle kids for 42 minutes, let alone 42 years. Eleanor surprised herself by laughing. They keep you young, or they age you faster than anything else. I was never sure which. What made you become a teacher? The question caught her off guard. No one had asked her that in decades. I always loved children, and I loved watching them discover things for the first time. There's nothing quite like seeing a child's face when they finally understand something that's been puzzling them. That moment of realization. She smiled. That's what I lived for. But not everyone at the dinner was welcoming. Eleanor noticed him almost immediately, a young man in the corner, maybe 24 or 25, with hostile eyes and a permanent scowl. He wore a leather vest like the others, but his had fewer patches. He was watching her with barely concealed contempt. Marcus followed her gaze and sighed. That's Ricky Sloan. He's new, still learning. Learning what? That being tough doesn't mean being cruel. That strength is about protecting people, not intimidating them. He stood. Excuse me for a minute, Eleanor. She watched as Marcus crossed the room toward Ricky. Their conversation was too quiet to hear, but she could see Marcus's face harden, his posture becoming more intimidating. Ricky's scowl deepened, and he gestured angrily toward Eleanor. Then Marcus grabbed him by the collar of his vest. The entire room went silent. You want to say that again? Marcus's voice was low and dangerous, carrying clearly in the sudden quiet. You want to tell me one more time that helping some old lady is a waste of our time? Ricky's face paled. I just meant, I know what you meant. And I'm telling you right now, this is exactly what we do. This is who we are, and if you can't understand that if you can't open your heart to people who need us, then you don't belong in this club. Period. He released Ricky and turned to the room. That goes for everyone. We're not just bikers anymore. We're protectors. We're family. And family means nobody gets left behind. His gaze found Eleanor. Nobody. The clock on the wall read 11:47 p.m. Eleanor sat in a comfortable chair by the fireplace, a cup of warm tea in her hands. The celebration continued around her, but she felt wrapped in a bubble of peace. For the first time in years, she wasn't cold. She wasn't hungry. She wasn't alone. Marcus pulled up a chair beside her. "You doing okay?" I'm wonderful, actually." She shook her head in amazement. "I never expected this, any of this." "Nobody ever does," he smiled. "That's kind of the point. Can I ask you something? Anything?" Eleanor hesitated. "When you came to my door tonight, how did you know? How did you know I needed you?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "I didn't, not for certain, but I've learned to recognize the signs, the houses that are always dark, the people who stop showing up to places they used to go, the ones who seem to be fading away." He met her eyes. "I saw the look on your face through that peephole, Eleanor, the look of someone who had already given up." Eleanor's hand trembled on her teacup. I had given up." "I know." He paused. "Can I ask you something now?" She nodded. "Those pill bottles on your counter, the ones you tried to hide when you let me in, what were they for?" Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. He knew. He'd known the whole time. She couldn't finish. The tears she'd been holding back all night finally broke free. Marcus took her hand gently. "You don't have to say it. I understand. And I want you to know something, Eleanor." She looked up at him through blurred vision. "Whatever you were planning tonight, it's over. Do you hear me? It's over. Because you're not alone anymore. And you're never going to be alone again." The church bells across town struck midnight. Around them, the clubhouse erupted in cheers. People hugged, kissed, wished each other Merry Christmas. Somewhere someone started singing Silent Night, and gradually, voice by voice, the whole room joined in. Eleanor sat by the fire, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by people she'd met only hours ago, but who already felt like family. And for the first time in 5 years, she felt something she'd thought was lost forever. Hope. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with trembling fingers, expecting nothing. The screen showed one new message. From David. "Merry Christmas, Mom. I know I haven't called. I'm sorry. I'll call tomorrow. I promise. I love you." Eleanor stared at the words until they blurred. Then she looked up at Marcus, who was watching her with concern. "Eleanor, what is it?" She handed him the phone. He read the message, and his face softened. "Well," he said quietly, "looks like this Christmas is full of miracles." Eleanor took his hand and squeezed it tight. "It is now," she whispered. "It is now." Eleanor read the text message 7 times before she could believe it was real. David. Her David. After 18 months of silence, 4 words she'd been dying to hear. "I love you." "He called me Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He hasn't called me Mom in years." Marcus squeezed her hand. "What are you going to do?" Eleanor stared at the phone. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning with 1,000 questions. Why now? Why tonight? After all this time, why did he suddenly remember she existed? "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to call him right back. Part of me wants to throw this phone across the room." "Both feelings are valid." He abandoned me, Marcus. For 18 months he let me think I was dead to him, and now on Christmas Eve he sends a text. She shook her head. That's not an apology. That's guilt. Marcus nodded slowly. Maybe. Or maybe something woke him up tonight. Same as something woke you up. Eleanor looked at him. You think I should forgive him? I think that's entirely up to you. But I also think... He paused, choosing his words carefully. I also think that people can change. Lord knows I did, and sometimes they need a second chance to prove it. Before Eleanor could respond, a commotion erupted across the room. Ricky Sloane was on his feet, his face red with anger, pointing at Patch Rodriguez. I don't take orders from you, Ricky snarled. You're not my boss. Patch held up his hands. I just asked you to help bring in the desserts, man. That's it. You asked me like I was your servant, like I was beneath you. That's not what You think because you've been here longer you're better than me. You're nothing. None of you are anything. You're just a bunch of washed-up criminals playing pretend. The room went dead silent. Marcus rose from his chair, and Eleanor saw something shift in his eyes. The gentle man who had sat beside her moments ago was gone. In his place was something far more dangerous. Ricky. One word. Quiet. Deadly. Ricky turned, and for a split second, fear flickered across his face. Then his pride snapped back into place. What? You going to throw me out, Bear? Go ahead. This whole thing is a joke anyway. Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides. He didn't touch Ricky, but he didn't have to. His presence alone made the younger man shrink back. You want to know what's a joke? Marcus's voice was low, controlled. A 24-year-old kid who thinks being tough means tearing other people down. A boy who can't see past his own ego long enough to recognize what we're really doing here. And what's that playing babysitter to a bunch of old people who should have been dead years ago? Eleanor flinched. The words hit her like a slap. Marcus moved so fast that no one had time to react. In one fluid motion, he grabbed Ricky by the throat and slammed him against the wall. You want to say that again? His voice was barely a whisper now. You want to tell me that Mrs. Brennan, who taught children for 42 years, who raised a family, who survived things you can't even imagine, should be dead? Ricky's eyes bulged. His hands clawed at Marcus's grip. Answer me. I didn't mean... You meant exactly what you said. That's your problem, Ricky. You always mean exactly what you say. And what you say tells me you don't have an ounce of humanity left in that hollow chest of yours. Bear. Patch stepped forward. Let him go. He's not worth it. Marcus held on for 3 more seconds. Then with visible effort, he released Ricky and stepped back. Get out. Ricky rubbed his throat, coughing. What? You heard me? Get out of my clubhouse. Get out of my sight. And don't come back until you're ready to be a human being. You can't just... I'm the president of this club. I can do whatever I want. And what I want is for you to leave before I do something we'll both regret. For a long moment, Ricky stood frozen. Then, with a snarl of fury, he grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back at Eleanor. This is your fault, he spat. All of this. You should have stayed in your apartment and finished what you started. The door slammed behind him. Eleanor's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might explode. Her hands were shaking, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. He knew. Somehow Ricky knew about the pills, about what she'd planned. How could he possibly know Marcus was at her side in an instant? Eleanor, look at me. She couldn't. The room was spinning. The walls were closing in. He's gone, Marcus said firmly. He can't hurt you. I won't let him. How did he know? Eleanor's voice was barely audible. About the pills. How did he know? Marcus's face darkened. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Patch appeared beside them. Bear, I'll handle Ricky. You stay with Mrs. Brennan. Find out who he's been talking to. Find out how he knew about Eleanor's situation. On it. Patch disappeared into the crowd, and Marcus turned his full attention back to Eleanor. I need you to breathe, he said gently. Can you do that for me? Just breathe. Eleanor tried. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way the grief counselor had taught her years ago. That's it. Good. Keep going. Slowly the panic began to recede. The room stopped spinning. Her heart rate dropped from a gallop to a canter. I'm okay, she said finally. I'm okay. No, you're not, and that's fine. You don't have to be okay right now. Marcus took her hands in his. What Ricky said was unforgivable, but it was also wrong. You understand he was wrong about you, about everything. He said I should have finished what I started. He's a broken, angry kid who doesn't know what he's talking about. But he was right about one thing. Eleanor looked up at Marcus, tears streaming down her face. I was going to do it. Tonight. If you hadn't knocked on my door, I would be dead by now. The words hung in the air between them, raw and terrible. Marcus didn't flinch, didn't look away. He just held her hands tighter. I know, he said quietly. I knew from the moment I saw you. That's why I came. You came to save me. I came to give you a reason to save yourself. Eleanor let out a sob. Why? Why do you care what happens to some old woman you've never met? Marcus was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. Because 32 years ago, someone did the same for me. Eleanor looked at him through blurred vision. What do you mean? I was 20 years old. Strung out on heroin, wanted for armed robbery, convinced my life was over. I had a gun in my hand, and I was ready to use it. He paused. A man found me in an alley behind a liquor store. Some nobody preacher from a church I'd never heard of. He sat down next to me in the garbage and the filth, and he said 7 words that changed my life. What did he say? Marcus smiled, his eyes glistening. He said, You shouldn't be alone tonight, son. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. He took me to his church, Marcus continued. Fed me, got me clean, gave me a reason to live when I had none. Stayed with me for 3 years until I was strong enough to stand on my own. He squeezed Eleanor's hands. His name was Father Thomas Mitchell. He died 10 years ago, and not a day goes by that I don't think about what would have happened if he hadn't found me that night. You would have died. I would have died. Marcus nodded. And everything that came after the club, the community work, all of it, none of it would exist. Hundreds of people I've helped over the years would have been alone, because one man took a chance on a broken kid nobody else wanted. Eleanor understood now. She understood everything. So you do the same thing, she whispered. You find people like you were. People who are ready to give up. I try. I don't always succeed. Sometimes I get there too late. Sometimes they won't open the door. He looked at her with something like wonder. But tonight you opened the door. And that, Eleanor, is a miracle. The celebration continued around them, but neither of them noticed. In this moment, there was only the two of them, connected by shared pain and unexpected grace. I don't know how to live anymore, Eleanor confessed. I've forgotten. After Walter died, after David stopped calling, I just stopped. I went through the motions, but I wasn't really alive. I was just waiting to die. I understand. Do you really? More than you know. Marcus leaned forward. After I got out of prison and found out my mother had died, I felt the same way. What was the point of getting clean, of trying to be better, if the one person I wanted to make proud was gone? I almost threw it all away. Almost went back to the life that put me behind bars in the first place. What stopped you? Her letters. All those letters she wrote me every week for 11 years. I went back and read them one by one, and you know what I found. Eleanor shook her head. Hope. In every single one, she told me she believed in me. She told me I was better than my worst mistakes. She told me that no matter what I'd done, she loved me and she was proud of me. His voice cracked. She never gave up on me, Eleanor. Not once. And I realized that if I gave up on myself, I'd be betraying everything she stood for. So you kept going. For her. For her. And then eventually for myself. For the club. For people like you. He smiled. It gets easier. I promise. The weight doesn't go away, but you learn to carry it. And someday you find that the weight has become strength. Eleanor wiped her eyes. I want to believe that. Then believe it. That's the first step. She looked around the room at the celebration still in full swing. These people, these strangers who had welcomed her without hesitation. Betty laughing with a group of bikers. Bobby telling his war stories to a rapt audience. Sam at the piano playing Christmas carols while everyone sang along. They all have stories, don't they? Eleanor asked. All these people, they've all been through something. Every single one. That's what brings us together. Not the motorcycles, not the leather, not the tough guy image. Pain. Loss. Loneliness. Marcus gestured around the room. Everyone here knows what it's like to hit rock bottom. And everyone here knows what it's like to climb back up. Even Ricky. Marcus's expression darkened. Especially Ricky. His story is worse than most. Abused by his father, abandoned by his mother, bounced around foster homes until he aged out of the system. He's got more rage in him than anyone I've ever met. Then why did you throw him out? Because rage without direction destroys everything it touches, including the person carrying it. Marcus sighed. Ricky needs help, but he won't accept it until he's ready. And right now he's too busy being angry at the world to see that the world is trying to save him. Will he come back? I don't know. I hope so. But that's his choice, not mine. Eleanor nodded slowly. She thought about David, about the text message still glowing on her phone. About choices and chances and the people who show up when you need them most. I'm going to reply to my son, she said suddenly. Right now. Tonight. Are you sure? No, but you said the first step is believing things can get better. I want to take that step. Marcus smiled. Then do it. I'll be right here. Eleanor picked up her phone. Her hands were still trembling, but less than before. She typed slowly, choosing each word with care. David. Thank you for reaching out. I've been waiting a long time to hear from you. I'm not alone tonight. I've found some unexpected friends. Call me tomorrow. We have a lot to talk about. I love you too, Mom. She pressed send before she could change her mind. Done, she said, letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. How do you feel? Terrified, hopeful, confused? She laughed shakily. All of the above. That's how healing starts. Messy and scary and completely uncertain. You make it sound so appealing. It's not, but it's worth it. The clock on the wall showed 1:17 a.m. Christmas Day had officially arrived. Betty approached them, her face warm and kind. Eleanor, sweetheart, they're serving pie. You have to try the pecan. It's Harold's grandmother's recipe. I don't think I could eat another bite, Eleanor said, patting her stomach. Nonsense. There's always room for pie. Betty took her hand. Come on, let's get you settled at the dessert table. Eleanor glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Go. Have pie. I'll be right here if you need me. She let Betty lead her away, feeling strange and light, and something she hadn't felt in years. Connected. She felt connected. At the dessert table, she found herself surrounded by Harold, Sam, and 3 other elderly guests she hadn't met yet. They made room for her immediately, pulling up an extra chair, passing plates of pie and cookies. "So you're the famous Eleanor," Harold said, his weathered face breaking into a smile. "Bear's been talking about finding you for weeks." "So I've heard. I still don't understand why." "Because you were one of us," Sam said, his deep voice resonant. "Alone. Forgotten. Invisible. We all know what that's like." Eleanor looked around the table. "You were all ready to check out?" Harold nodded. "In one way or another. Betty here was going to drive her car off a bridge. Sam stopped taking his heart medication. Me, I just stopped eating. Figured I'd fade away nice and quiet." "What changed?" "Bear happened." Sam took a bite of pie. "Same as you. He showed up, knocked on the door, and reminded us that we still had a reason to live." Betty reached over and squeezed Eleanor's hand. "It's okay to be overwhelmed. I cried for 3 days straight after my first Christmas here, but then I woke up on the 4th day and realized I wanted to wake up on the 5th and the 6th, and every day after that." Eleanor felt tears threatening again. "I don't know if I can do this. Start over at 79. "Honey, I started over at 82, Harold said. "And look at me now, I'm the bingo champion of Cedar Falls." Everyone laughed, and for the first time all night, Eleanor laughed with them. A real laugh from somewhere deep inside her. This was what she'd been missing. Not just company, but community. People who understood. People who'd been where she was and made it to the other side. She took a bite of pecan pie. It was the best thing she'd tasted in years. "Oh my God," she said, her eyes widening. "This is incredible." "Told you," Betty said triumphantly. "Harold's grandmother knew what she was doing." The night continued, and Eleanor found herself talking more than she had in months, about Walter, about teaching, about the loneliness that had nearly swallowed her whole. And these strangers, these beautiful, broken, wonderful strangers listened without judgment. At 2:30 a.m., Marcus found her again. "How are you doing?" "Better," Eleanor said, and meant it. "Much better." "Good. There's someone I want you to meet." He led her across the room to where a young woman sat alone, her eyes red from crying. She couldn't have been more than 30, with dark hair and a face that looked like it hadn't slept in days. "Eleanor, this is Sarah Chen, Linda's daughter." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Linda's daughter, Linda, from the community center." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "Mrs. Brennan, my mother talked about you all the time. She was so worried when you stopped coming to the lunch program." I didn't think anyone noticed." "She noticed. She always notices." Sarah's voice broke. "That's why I'm here tonight. Because my mother noticed that I was falling apart, and she sent me to Bear." Eleanor sat down beside the young woman. "What happened, sweetheart?" "My husband left me 3 weeks ago, on our anniversary. Said he'd found someone younger, someone who didn't bore him." Sarah laughed bitterly. "I gave him 8 years. I thought we were happy." Eleanor took the young woman's hand. "I'm so sorry. I was going to hurt myself tonight. I had it all planned out. But Bear showed up at my apartment just like he showed up at yours." Sarah looked at Marcus with something like awe. "He said my mother was worried. He said I shouldn't be alone on Christmas Eve." Marcus shrugged. "Linda Chen is a force of nature. When she tells me to check on someone, I check on them." "You saved my life," Sarah said. "No, I gave you an opportunity. You saved your own life by opening the door. Eleanor squeezed Sarah's hand. He said the same thing to me. I'm starting to think he uses that line on everyone. Only because it's true, Marcus said with a slight smile. The three of them sat together, two women from different generations, bonded by pain and the unexpected grace of a man who refused to let them suffer alone. What happens now? Sarah asked. After tonight, do we just go back to our lives? If you want, Marcus said. But you don't have to. The club meets every week. The senior lunch program starts back up in January. There are people here who want to help if you'll let them. I don't know how to let people help me, Sarah admitted. I've always done everything on my own. Me too, Eleanor said. For 5 years I've been alone. I'd forgotten what it felt like to ask for help. And now? Eleanor looked around the room, at Betty and Harold laughing over pie, at Sam playing piano while a group of children danced, at bikers and elderly people and families all mixed together in a way that should have been impossible, but somehow worked perfectly. Now, she said slowly, I think I'm ready to remember. The clock struck 3:00 a.m. The party was finally winding down. Families with children had left hours ago. The elderly guests were beginning to yawn, and even the bikers looked tired. But no one seemed to want to leave. Marcus stood in the center of the room and raised his hand for silence. Before we call it a night, I want to say something. The room fell quiet. Every year we do this Christmas Eve dinner, and every year I watch miracles happen. I watch strangers become family. I watch people who had given up on life find reasons to keep going. I watch walls come down and hearts open up. He looked at Eleanor. Tonight I met a woman who taught children for 42 years, who loved her husband for 47 years, who raised a son and gave everything she had to her community. And tonight she reminded me why we do what we do. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush with embarrassment. And something else. Pride, maybe. Or belonging. This isn't just about motorcycles or leather jackets or looking tough, Marcus continued. This is about showing up for each other. This is about saying you matter, your life matters, and I'm not going to let you disappear without a fight. He raised his coffee cup. To Eleanor, and to everyone else who opened their door tonight. May this be the first Christmas of many that you spend surrounded by people who love you. To Eleanor, the room echoed. Eleanor pressed her hand to her heart, overwhelmed. For the first time in 5 years, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. And somewhere in Sacramento, her phone sat on her son's nightstand, his mother's message glowing in the darkness, waiting to change everything. The sun was just beginning to rise over Cedar Falls when Eleanor woke up in a bed that wasn't her own. For a moment she panicked. Where was she? What had happened? Then the memories flooded back. The clubhouse, the dinner, Marcus, the text from David. She was in one of the guest rooms at the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse, tucked under a thick quilt that smelled like fabric softener. Someone had left a glass of water on the nightstand and a handwritten note. Breakfast at 9. Don't be late. Betty Eleanor sat up slowly, her joints protesting. She'd slept in her clothes, but someone had removed her shoes and covered her with the quilt. Small kindnesses. The kind she'd forgotten existed. Her phone lay beside the water glass. She picked it up with trembling hands. No response from David. The disappointment hit her harder than she expected. Stupid, she thought. Stupid to hope. He probably regretted sending that text the moment he sobered up. A knock at the door made her jump. Eleanor, you awake? Betty's voice. Yes, come in. Betty entered carrying a cup of coffee. Thought you might need this. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in months, actually. Eleanor took the coffee gratefully. Thank you, for everything. Don't thank me yet, Wait until you see what Harold's making for breakfast. The man thinks he's Gordon Ramsay. Eleanor smiled, but her eyes drifted back to the phone. Betty noticed. Still nothing from your son? No. Give it time. It's only... She checked her watch. 8:30 in the morning, on Christmas Day. He's probably still asleep. Probably. Eleanor didn't believe it. David had always been an early riser. If he wanted to call, he would have called by now. Come on, Betty said, offering her hand. Let's get some food in you. Everything looks better after breakfast. The main hall of the clubhouse had been transformed overnight. The Christmas decorations were still up, but the long dining tables had been replaced with smaller round tables covered in white cloths. The smell of bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. About 30 people remained from the night before. Eleanor spotted Harold at a makeshift griddle, flipping pancakes with theatrical flair. Sam was at the piano again, playing soft jazz. Marcus sat at a corner table with Patch, deep in conversation. He looked up when Eleanor entered, and his face broke into a genuine smile. There she is, the woman of the hour. Please don't call me that. Too late. You're officially a legend around here. He pulled out a chair for her. How do you feel? Overwhelmed, grateful, terrified? She sat down. About the same as last night, actually. That's progress. Marcus poured her a glass of orange juice. Terrified is better than hopeless. Patch stood up. I'm going to check on breakfast. You want anything specific, Mrs. Brennan? Just Eleanor, please. And no, whatever Harold's making is fine. Brave woman. Patch grinned and headed toward the griddle. Eleanor watched him go. He seems like a good kid. The best. Lost his grandmother last year. It hit him hard. That's why he volunteered for the senior outreach program. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Everyone here has a story, Eleanor. Everyone has someone they've lost. Including Ricky. Marcus's expression darkened. Including Ricky. His story is one of the worst, but that doesn't excuse what he said to you last night. Have you heard from him? No. And honestly, I'm not sure I want to. He paused. That's a lie. I want to hear from him. I want to know he's okay, but I also can't let him hurt people just because he's hurting. Eleanor nodded slowly. My son was like that for a while. After Walter died, he was so angry and I never understood why. I thought he was grieving, but it was more than that. It was like he blamed me somehow. For what? I don't know. For surviving, maybe. For not dying first. Her voice cracked. He loved his father so much. And when Walter got sick, David just disappeared. He couldn't handle watching him fade away. So he left. And by the time Walter died, David was already gone. Did he come to the funeral? For 3 hours. He flew in, sat in the back, didn't speak to anyone. And then he left for the airport before the reception even started. Eleanor wiped her eyes. That was the last time I saw him in person. 5 years ago. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Some people can't face death. It scares them so much that they run from anyone who reminds them of it. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No. It's supposed to help you understand that it's not your fault. Whatever's broken inside David, you didn't break it. Before Eleanor could respond, her phone rang. She froze. The screen showed a number she knew by heart. A number she'd been staring at for 18 months, willing it to call. David. Answer it, Marcus said quietly. Eleanor's hand shook as she pressed accept. Hello? Mom. David's voice was flat, tired, not the voice of a man happy to be calling his mother on Christmas morning. David, Merry Christmas. Yeah, you too. A pause. I got your text. I got yours first. Another pause. Longer this time. Eleanor could hear something in the background. Traffic, maybe. Or wind. Look, Mom, I wanted to explain about the message. I'd been drinking last night and you'd been drinking. Eleanor's heart sank. So you didn't mean it. I meant it. I don't want you to read too much into it. Okay, it was Christmas Eve. I was feeling sentimental, that's all. Eleanor closed her eyes. The familiar pain was back, sharp and cold. I see. Don't do that. Do what? That thing you do. That martyred silence. It's manipulative. I'm not being manipulative, David. I'm trying to understand. There's nothing to understand. I sent a text. That's it. I'm not promising anything more than that. Marcus was watching her concern etched on his face. She turned away, unable to meet his eyes. Why are you calling David, if not to wish me Merry Christmas? Because I wanted to make sure you didn't get your hopes up. I know how you are. You probably already have fantasies about me flying home for a big reunion. The cruelty of it took her breath away. I don't have fantasies about anything, David. I stopped having those a long time ago. Good. Then we understand each other. No, we don't. Something shifted inside Eleanor. The familiar weight of defeat was still there, but underneath it, something new was stirring. Something that felt dangerously like anger. We don't understand each other at all, because I don't understand how my son, the boy I raised, the boy I loved with every fiber of my being, turned into someone so cold. Don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm stating a fact. You've become cruel, David, and I don't know when it happened or why, but I'm done pretending it's okay. Silence on the other end. When David spoke again, his voice was different, harder. You want to know when it happened, I'll tell you. It happened when I watched Dad waste away for 2 years while you played the devoted wife. It happened when you made his death about your grief, your loneliness, your needs. It happened when I realized that nothing I ever did was enough for you, because I wasn't him. That's not true? It is true. Every time I called, you talked about Dad. Every visit, you compared me to him. Every conversation ended with you crying about how much you missed him. You never asked about my life, Mom. Never asked about my job or my friends or anything that mattered to me. I was just a substitute for the man you really wanted to talk to. Eleanor's legs gave out. She sat down hard, her free hand gripping the table for support. David, I didn't know. I didn't realize. Of course you didn't. You never do. You're so wrapped up in your own tragedy that you can't see anyone else's pain. That's not fair. Life's not fair, Mom. I thought you'd have learned that by now. The line went dead. Eleanor sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. David's words echoed in her mind, each one a knife. You made his death about your grief. Nothing I ever did was enough. I was just a substitute. Was it true? Had she really been so blind? Marcus sat down beside her. He didn't speak, didn't touch her, just waited. He hates me, Eleanor whispered. My son hates me. He's in pain. Pain makes people say terrible things. But what if he's right? What if I did push him away? What if I was so wrapped up in losing Walter that I lost David, too? Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, it doesn't justify cruelty. You made mistakes. So did he. The difference is you're willing to acknowledge yours. Eleanor looked at him, her eyes red and swollen. How do you know that? Because you're sitting here asking if you were wrong. David's not asking that question. He's too busy being angry. Betty appeared at the table, her face worried. Eleanor, is everything okay? My son called. Eleanor's voice was hollow. He wanted to make sure I didn't get my hopes up about reconciling. Betty's expression shifted from concern to fury. He said that on Christmas morning that little... Betty. Marcus held up a hand. Not now. I'm sorry. When Betty sat down across from Eleanor. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. You don't deserve that. Maybe I do. Eleanor stared at the table. Maybe I was a terrible mother, and I just didn't know it. That's ridiculous. You devoted your life to teaching children. You cared for your husband through 2 years of illness. I made it about me. Eleanor's voice cracked. That's what David said. I made Walter's death about my grief. I never asked about David's life. I needed him so much that I couldn't see what he needed from me. The table fell silent. Finally, Sam approached his weathered face kind. Mind if I sit? Eleanor gestured weakly to an empty chair. I heard some of that, Sam said. Not trying to eavesdrop, but voices carry. He settled into the chair with a grunt. Can I tell you something? Please. I had 2 wives. First one died of cancer when I was 40. Second one left me 10 years later for a man half my age. Both times I handled it badly. Pushed away my kids, my friends, everyone who tried to help. Spent years drowning in self-pity. What changed? I ran out of people to push away. Finally hit bottom with nobody left to blame but myself. Sam smiled sadly. Your son's going through his own version of that. He's not ready to hear you yet. But that doesn't mean you give up on him. How can I not give up? He's made it very clear he doesn't want me in his life. That's what he says now. But people change. I changed. Took me 20 years and a lot of AA meetings, but I got there eventually. Reconnected with my daughter just before she died. His voice wavered. Got 2 good years with her at the end. Best 2 years of my life. Eleanor reached over and took his hand. I'm sorry you lost her. Me too. But I'm grateful for the time we had, and I'm grateful I didn't give up on her even when she told me to. He squeezed her hand. Don't give up on your boy, Eleanor. He'll come around, when he's ready. The morning passed slowly. Eleanor tried to participate in the Christmas festivities, but her heart wasn't in it. David's words kept playing on repeat in her mind. I was just a substitute for the man you really wanted to talk to. Was that true? She thought back over the years since Walter's death. The phone calls with David that always seemed to end in awkward silences. The visits that felt strained and uncomfortable. Had she really talked about Walter that much? Yes, she realized with a sinking feeling. She had, because Walter was safe. Walter was familiar, and talking about him was easier than navigating the minefield of her relationship with a son who seemed more like a stranger every year. But was that her fault? Or was David just looking for excuses? She didn't know anymore. She didn't know anything. At noon, Marcus found her sitting alone in the guest room, staring at Walter's photograph on her phone. Mind some company. I'm not very good company right now. Neither am I most of the time. He sat down in the chair across from her. You want to talk about it? What's there to talk about? My son thinks I'm a selfish, grief-obsessed narcissist who pushed him away. Maybe he's right. Or maybe he's a hurt kid looking for someone to blame. He's 43 years old. Hurt kids don't have an age limit. Marcus leaned forward. Eleanor, I've known you for about 18 hours. In that time, I've watched you connect with strangers, comfort a young woman in crisis, and open your heart to people you'd never met before. Does that sound like a selfish narcissist to you? People can be different with strangers than they are with family. That's true. But the way you talked about Walter, about David, about your teaching career, there's no selfishness in that. There's love, deep, complicated, messy love. Eleanor wiped her eyes. Then why can't David see that? Because he's too close, and because he's carrying his own pain that has nothing to do with you. Marcus paused. Can I tell you what I see? Please. I see a man who lost his father and couldn't handle it, who ran away instead of facing the grief. and who's been running ever since, getting angrier and angrier at the mother who stayed. Because every time he looks at you, he's reminded of his own cowardice. Eleanor stared at him. You think David's angry at himself? I think David's furious at himself, and it's easier to project that onto you than to face what he did. He abandoned his dying father. He abandoned his grieving mother. That's a lot of guilt to carry, Eleanor. And some people would rather burn down every relationship they have than admit they were wrong. The words hit her with unexpected force. She thought about David's rage on the phone, the way he'd attacked her preemptively before she'd said anything critical at all. He was defending himself, she said slowly, before I even accused him of anything. Exactly. That's not the behavior of someone who's at peace. That's the behavior of someone who's fighting a battle inside his own head. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. Does that mean I should keep trying? Even after what he said? That's up to you. But I'll say this, my mother never stopped trying with me. Even when I was at my worst, strung out, violent, everything wrong with me, she kept writing those letters. She never gave up. And that's the only reason I'm sitting here today. Before Eleanor could respond, Patch burst through the door. Bear, we have a problem. Marcus was on his feet instantly. What is it? It's Dorothy Keene, the lady on Maple Street who was on our list for next year's visit. Patch's face was pale. Her neighbor just called. She's dead. Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. Dead. They found her this morning. Looks like she passed away sometime yesterday, Christmas Eve. Patch's voice cracked. She was alone, Bear. She died alone. Marcus closed his eyes. For a moment, the mask of calm leadership slipped, and Eleanor saw the raw pain underneath. How old was she? 82, widowed. No kids. The neighbor said she hadn't seen anyone go in or out of that house in weeks. We were supposed to reach her. She was on the list. We ran out of time. There were too many names and we couldn't get to everyone before... I know. Marcus's voice was hoarse. I know. Eleanor stood up slowly. Marcus, this isn't your fault. Isn't it? We have a list. We have resources. And we still couldn't save her. You can't save everyone. You saved me. One person. I saved one person while another died alone, half a mile away. He turned to face her, and she saw tears in his eyes. This is why we do what we do, Eleanor. Because there are hundreds of Dorothys out there. Thousands. And most of them will die exactly like she did, forgotten, invisible, completely alone. The room fell silent. Finally, Patch spoke. What do you want to do? Bear? Marcus took a deep breath, then another. When he spoke, his voice was steady. We honor her. We find out who she was, what she loved, what her story was, and we make sure she's not forgotten. He looked at Eleanor. Will you help me? Me, I didn't even know her. Neither did I. But you understand what she went through. You know what it's like to be invisible. He held out his hand. Help me give her the ending she deserved. Eleanor took his hand without hesitation. Yes, I'll help. 2 hours later, Eleanor stood in Dorothy Keene's empty living room, surrounded by the remnants of a life nobody had noticed ending. The house was small and tidy, but cold. The furnace had stopped working days ago, maybe weeks. A half-eaten can of soup sat on the kitchen counter. Christmas cards that had never been sent lay scattered on the dining room table, each one addressed in careful handwriting. To people who never came. To family who had forgotten she existed. Eleanor picked up one of the cards. It was addressed to someone named Michael in Phoenix. Dear Michael, Merry Christmas from your Aunt Dorothy. I hope this finds you well. I think about you often and would love to hear from you. Love always, Aunt Dorothy. Simple words. Desperate words. The words of a woman reaching out to anyone who might remember she was alive. She was a librarian, Marcus said, appearing beside her. Retired 20 years ago. Never married, no children. Her sister died in 2015, and after that she was alone. The neighbor said she used to wave from the window every morning. Then about 6 months ago she stopped. Nobody checked on her. Nobody asked why. Eleanor set down the card. We could have been her Marcus. Any of us. Betty, Harold, Sam, me. We could all have ended up exactly like this. I know. That's why we have to do better. We have to reach more people. We have to find them before it's too late. How? You said yourself there are thousands of Dorothys out there. Then we need thousands of people looking for them. Marcus picked up one of the unsent Christmas cards. This can't happen again, Eleanor. I won't let it happen again. A knock at the door made them both turn. Patch entered, and behind him was a figure Eleanor never expected to see again. Ricky Sloane. He looked different. Smaller somehow. His eyes were red, and his usual hostility was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shame. Bear, I need to talk to you. Marcus's jaw tightened. I don't think we have anything to say to each other. Please, Ricky's voice cracked. Just give me 5 minutes. Marcus looked at Eleanor. She nodded almost imperceptibly. 5 minutes, Marcus said. Talk. Ricky took a shaky breath. I heard about Mrs. Keene. Patch told me she died alone on Christmas Eve. He paused. That could have been Mrs. Brennan, if you hadn't gotten there in time. Yes, it could have. And the things I said, about how she should have finished what she started. Ricky's face crumbled. I didn't mean it. I swear to God I didn't mean it. Then why did you say it? Because I'm broken. Because I'm angry all the time and I don't know how to stop. Because... He choked on the words. Because my grandmother died the same way, alone, in a house nobody visited. And I was supposed to check on her and I didn't. And by the time I got there, she'd been dead for 3 days. The room went absolutely still. Eleanor felt something shift inside her. This angry, hostile young man wasn't a monster. He was a mirror. Ricky, she said softly. Look at me. He raised his eyes, and she saw the little boy behind the tough exterior. The child who had never been loved enough. The grandson who would carry his failure forever. I forgive you, she said, for what you said to me. I forgive you. Ricky broke down, sobbing ragged cries that shook his entire body. Marcus moved first, crossing the room and pulling the young man into a fierce embrace. It's okay, Marcus said. It's going to be okay. I'm sorry, Ricky gasped. I'm so sorry. I know you are. Eleanor watched them, tears streaming down her own face. 2 broken people finding their way back to each other. Finding their way back to themselves. This was what healing looked like. Messy and painful and utterly unexpected. And in the quiet house of a woman who had died alone, something new was being born. 3 months changed everything. Eleanor stood in front of her bathroom mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at her. She had gained 15 pounds. Her cheeks had color again. Her hands, those trembling hands that had lined up pill bottles on Christmas Eve, were steady now. She was alive. Truly alive. For the first time in 5 years. You ready? Marcus's voice came from the living room. Almost. She adjusted her sweater, a new one bought with money she hadn't expected to have, and took a deep breath. Coming. The living room of her duplex was warm now. Marcus had sent a crew to fix the furnace 2 days after Christmas, and they'd refused to accept payment. Since then, someone from the club stopped by every week. Sometimes it was Patch with groceries. Sometimes it was Betty with homemade soup. Sometimes it was Ricky, awkward and silent, just checking in. She was never alone anymore. "Big day," Marcus said, handing her a cup of coffee. "You nervous? Terrified. Good. That means you're taking it seriously." Today was the official launch of the Dorothy Initiative. 3 months of planning, fundraising, and organizing had led to this moment. Eleanor had been at the center of it all, working alongside Marcus to build something that might actually save lives. "What if nobody shows up?" Eleanor asked. "Then we try again tomorrow, and the day after that, and the day after that." You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, it's just necessary. Marcus opened the front door. "Now come on, we've got a community to build." The Cedar Falls Community Center was packed. Eleanor stopped in the doorway, stunned by the crowd. There had to be at least 200 people here. Bikers in leather vests stood next to church volunteers in matching t-shirts. Social workers mingled with local business owners. Elderly residents sat in rows of folding chairs, their faces a mixture of hope and uncertainty. "Bear." Patch waved from across the room. "We've got a problem." Marcus was at his side in seconds. "What kind of problem?" "The good kind. We've run out of chairs. There are 50 more people outside who want to come in." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes. 50 more people. 50 people who cared enough to stand in the cold for a program that didn't even exist 3 months ago. "Get more chairs from the church next door," Marcus ordered. "Marcus. And someone open that side entrance." "On it." Betty appeared at Eleanor's elbow. "Can you believe this? I thought we'd get maybe 30 people." "I can't believe any of it." "Believe it, sweetheart. You helped make this happen." Eleanor shook her head. "Marcus made it happen. You just gave him the reason to do it. Dorothy's death broke something open in him. But you helped him turn that grief into action." Betty squeezed her arm. "Don't sell yourself short, Eleanor. You're the heart of this whole thing." Before Eleanor could respond, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Mrs. Brennan." She turned to see Harold making his way toward her, his cane tapping against the floor. But he wasn't alone. Walking beside him, looking uncomfortable and out of place, was Ricky Sloane. "Harold. Ricky." She smiled at both of them. "I'm glad you came." "Wouldn't miss it." Harold's weathered face creased with pride. "Besides, I had to make sure this one didn't chicken out." Ricky shifted his weight. "I wasn't going to chicken out. You said you were going to wait in the car." "I changed my mind." Eleanor watched the exchange with wonder. 3 months ago, Ricky had been hostile and bitter, spewing cruelty at anyone who got too close. Now here he was, escorting an 84-year-old veteran to a community event. "How are the chess lessons going?" she asked. Harold's eyes lit up. "This boy's a natural. Beat me twice last week." "You let me win." "I did no such thing. You earned those victories fair and square." Ricky's cheeks flushed. Eleanor had never seen him look so young, so vulnerable, so human. "The program's about to start," Marcus announced from the front of the room. "Can everyone take their seats?" The crowd settled, and Eleanor found herself in the front row, flanked by Betty and Harold. Marcus stood at a podium looking more nervous than she'd ever seen him. "Thank you all for coming," he began. 3 months ago on Christmas Day, we learned that a woman named Dorothy Keene had died alone in her home. She was 82 years old. She had no family, no visitors, no one to check on her. She'd been dead for at least 24 hours before anyone noticed. The room was silent. Dorothy's death broke my heart, but it also opened my eyes. Because Dorothy wasn't unique. There are hundreds of people in this community just like her, elderly, isolated, invisible. People who could die tomorrow, and no one would know until the smell reached the neighbors. A few gasps. Marcus didn't flinch. That's not acceptable. Not in Cedar Falls. Not anywhere. So we created the Dorothy Initiative. Our mission is simple. No one dies alone. We will identify isolated seniors in our community. We will visit them weekly. We will make sure they have food, heat, medical care, and human connection. And we will do this not as charity, but as family. He paused, his eyes finding Eleanor in the crowd. I want to introduce someone. 3 months ago on Christmas Eve, I knocked on this woman's door. She was alone, freezing, hungry, and ready to give up. Today, she's one of the driving forces behind this initiative. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor Brennan. The applause was thunderous. Eleanor's legs shook as she stood and made her way to the podium. 200 pairs of eyes watched her. She gripped the edges of the lectern, willing herself not to pass out. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I've never been good at public speaking. 42 years as a teacher, and I still get nervous in front of a crowd. A ripple of laughter. 3 months ago, I was ready to die. Not from illness or accident, but from choice. I had decided that my life was over, that I was invisible, forgotten, worthless. Her voice cracked. I was wrong. She looked at Marcus, at Betty, at Harold, at Ricky. I was wrong because I didn't know that there were people in this world who show up for strangers, who knock on doors and refuse to leave, who see the invisible and refuse to look away. She took a deep breath. Dorothy Keene died alone. I didn't. And the only difference between us was timing. Marcus got to me before it was too late. The room was utterly still. But it's not enough to save one person. It's not enough to reach a few. We have to reach all of them. Every single person in this community who is suffering in silence. Every widow, every veteran, every forgotten soul who thinks nobody cares. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. We care. And starting today, we're going to prove it. The applause was deafening. After the presentation, Eleanor found herself surrounded by volunteers signing up for the initiative. Teachers, nurses, retirees, teenagers, all of them eager to help. Mrs. Brennan. A young woman approached, her eyes red from crying. I'm Jennifer. Dorothy Keene was my neighbor. Eleanor took her hand. I'm so sorry for your loss. That's just it. She wasn't my loss. I barely knew her. She lived next door for 6 years and I never once knocked on her door. Jennifer's voice broke. I saw her through the window sometimes, sitting alone. I told myself I'd introduce myself someday, and then someday never came. You can't blame yourself. Can't I? I was 20 feet away. I could have checked on her any time. I just didn't. Eleanor thought about David. About all the calls she'd waited for that never came. About the distance that had grown between them inch by inch until they were strangers who shared DNA. We all carry that guilt, she said quietly. The people we should have called. The doors we should have knocked on. The words we should have said. She met Jennifer's eyes. But guilt doesn't help anyone. Action does. You're here now. That matters. Jennifer wiped her face. I want to volunteer. I want to make sure no one else dies like Dorothy did. Then sign up. We need people like you. As Jennifer headed toward the registration table, Ricky appeared at Eleanor's side. That was intense. It was honest. Same thing sometimes. He shifted awkwardly. Can I ask you something? Of course. How do you do it? Talk about that stuff in front of everyone. The pills, wanting to die, all of it. Doesn't it kill you to be that exposed? Eleanor considered the question. It did at first. But then I realized something. The shame I felt about wanting to die, that shame, was what almost killed me. The secrecy, the isolation, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. That's what made me invisible. So you just stopped pretending. I started telling the truth. About my pain, my loneliness, my mistakes. And you know what happened? People didn't run away. They moved closer. She put a hand on his shoulder. The things we're most ashamed of are usually the things that connect us to everyone else. Ricky was quiet for a long moment. I've never told anyone about my grandmother. Before Marcus. Before you. And how did it feel? Terrible. Like dying. He paused. But also free. Like I could finally breathe. That's healing, Ricky. It doesn't feel good. It feels like death. But it's the opposite. His jaw tightened. I'm not sure I know how to heal. Nobody does. We just keep showing up and hope we figure it out along the way. Marcus found them an hour later, looking exhausted but triumphant. Final count 237 volunteers, plus the 52 seniors who signed up to be visited. That's incredible, Eleanor said. It's a start. We've got a list of 112 isolated seniors in Cedar Falls. That's just the ones we know about. The real number is probably 3 times that. So we keep going. We keep going. Marcus handed her a folder. Here's your assignment list. 12 seniors, all within walking distance of your place. You'll have a partner for each visit, safety in numbers. Eleanor opened the folder. 12 names. 12 people she'd never met. 12 chances to do what nobody had done for Dorothy. Who's my partner? For the first few weeks, me. Marcus smiled. After that, we'll rotate. But I want to make sure you're comfortable before I hand you off. You think I can't handle it? I think you can handle anything. I just like spending time with you. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. Careful. People will talk. Let them. I've got nothing to hide. The first visit was harder than Eleanor expected. The woman's name was Agnes Porter, 91 years old, bedridden. A caretaker came twice a week, but otherwise she was alone. Who are you? Agnes's voice was sharp, suspicious. I'm Eleanor Brennan. This is Marcus Sullivan. We're from the Dorothy Initiative. Never heard of it. It's new. We check on seniors in the community. Make sure they're okay. Agnes's eyes narrowed. You trying to sell something? No, ma'am. We're just here to visit. Visit? Why would you visit me? I don't know you. Eleanor glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. She sat down in the chair beside Agnes's bed. You're right. You don't know me. But I know what it's like to be alone, to feel like nobody remembers you exist. She took a deep breath. 3 months ago, I was ready to end my life. A stranger showed up at my door and changed everything. Now I want to do the same for you. Agnes stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly her expression softened. You were going to kill yourself. Yes. Why didn't you? Because someone knocked on my door and refused to let me die alone. Agnes turned her head away. When she spoke, her voice was different, smaller, older. My daughter stopped calling last year, said I was too negative, too much work, and a tear slid down her weathered cheek. I've been waiting for her to forgive me, but she never does. Eleanor's heart clenched. She knew that weight. She was still waiting for David. My son said the same thing to me, she admitted. He told me I made his father's death about myself, that I never asked about his life. Agnes turned back to face her. Did you make it about yourself? Probably. I was grieving. I didn't know how to reach out without falling apart. Eleanor wiped her eyes. But that doesn't mean he was right to abandon me, and it doesn't mean your daughter is right to abandon you. She thinks she is. She's wrong. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Agnes reached out and took Eleanor's hand. "Will you come back? Every week, I promise. Even if I'm difficult, I'm told I'm very difficult." Eleanor laughed. "I taught second grade for 42 years. I can handle difficult." Agnes almost smiled. "Teachers always think they can save everyone." "Not everyone, just the ones who let me through the door." The weeks blurred together after that. Eleanor visited 12 seniors, then 20, then 30. She organized baking sessions with Betty chess tournaments, with Harold music nights, with Sam. She recruited volunteers from churches, schools, businesses. She spoke at community meetings, gave interviews to local news stations, wrote letters to the editor demanding more resources for elderly services. She was busy. She was needed. She was alive. And then on a Thursday afternoon in late March, David called again. Eleanor almost didn't answer. The number on her screen brought back all the pain of their last conversation, his cruelty, his accusations, his dismissal. But something made her press accept. "Mom." David's voice was different, softer, uncertain. "David, I saw you on the news. The local affiliate picked up the story about your initiative." Eleanor's hand tightened on the phone. "You saw that you looked good, healthy, happy." A pause. "I didn't know you were that sick before. I didn't know about the pills." "Yeah." His voice cracked. "Mom, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you call? Would you have answered?" Silence. The question hung between them, sharp as a blade. "I don't know," David admitted finally. "I was so angry back then. At you, at Dad, at everything. I couldn't see past it. And now I'm just scared. When I saw you on that news segment talking about how you almost died, I couldn't breathe. I kept thinking about what would have happened if that guy hadn't shown up. If you had, actually. I almost did, David. I was that close." "I know. That's what terrifies me." Eleanor sat down heavily. Her legs were shaking. "Why are you calling David, really?" "Because I owe you an apology. What I said at Christmas about you making Dad's death about yourself, about you pushing me away, it wasn't fair." It wasn't entirely wrong, either. Maybe not. But I was throwing stones from a glass house. I'm the one who ran away. I'm the one who couldn't handle watching Dad die. I'm the one who... His voice broke. "I'm the one who left you alone." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, you did. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." The words she'd waited 5 years to hear. 3 words that should have changed everything. But they didn't. Not yet. "Sorry is a beginning," Eleanor said carefully. "It's not an ending." I know I can't fix this with a phone call, but I want to try. If you'll let me." "What does trying look like to you?" "I don't know. Maybe I could come visit, see what you're building there. Meet these people who saved your life." David paused. "Maybe I could figure out how to be your son again." Eleanor closed her eyes. Every instinct told her to protect herself, to keep him at arm's length, to guard the fragile peace she'd built over the past 3 months. But another voice, Marcus's voice, reminded her, people can change. I did. And sometimes they need a second chance to prove it. "Okay," she said quietly. "Come visit." "Really? You mean it?" "I mean, I'm willing to try. That's all I can promise right now." "That's enough. That's more than enough." David's voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me." "I never gave up on you, David. I just ran out of ways to reach you." "I know, and I'm sorry for that too." After they hung up, Eleanor sat in the quiet of her living room for a long time. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking not from fear this time, but from hope. David was coming. Her son was coming home. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. "Eleanor, everything okay?" David called. A pause. "And he's coming to visit. He wants to try to fix things." Wow, that's huge. How do you feel? Scared, hopeful, confused?" She laughed shakily. "About the same as that first night at the clubhouse. Want me to come over?" "Please." Marcus arrived 20 minutes later. He didn't ask questions, didn't offer advice. He just sat beside her on the couch and held her hand while she cried out all the emotions she'd been holding back for 5 years. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked finally. "What if he comes here and we just end up hurting each other again? Then at least you tried. That's all any of us can do." "Is that enough?" "It has to be. Because the alternative is giving up, and you've already proven you're not someone who gives up." Eleanor looked at him. This man who had appeared on her doorstep and changed everything. This former prisoner, former addict, former outlaw, who had become the most trustworthy person she knew. "You saved my life, Marcus." "No, I gave you an opportunity. You saved yourself." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true. I knocked on your door, but you opened it. I invited you to dinner, but you got in the truck. Every step of the way you made choices that kept you alive." He squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than you know, Eleanor, and David is about to find that out for himself." She leaned against his shoulder, exhausted and hopeful and terrified all at once. "Do you think he can change, really change?" "I think anyone can change. The question is whether they want to badly enough." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "But I'll tell you this. A man who calls his mother after seeing her on the news, who apologizes for things he said months ago, who asks for a second chance he doesn't deserve, that's a man who's already changing. Whether he finishes the journey is up to him." Eleanor nodded slowly. "You're right. I can't control what David does. I can only control what I do." "And what are you going to do?" She looked at the folder on her coffee table. 37 names now. 37 people counting on her to show up. "I'm going to keep building this initiative. I'm going to keep visiting the people who need me. And when David gets here, I'm going to show him who his mother has become." Marcus smiled. "That's my girl. I'm 79 years old. I'm not anyone's girl." "Fine. That's my hero." Eleanor laughed for the first time all day. "That's worse." "Deal with it." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eleanor watched through her window, the same window she used to stare through in despair. So much had changed. So much was still changing. And somewhere in Sacramento, her son was packing a suitcase, preparing for a journey that would bring him back to the mother he'd abandoned. Whether it would heal them or break them, Eleanor didn't know. But for the first time in years, she was ready to find out. David's flight landed at 3:47 p.m. on a Friday afternoon in April. Eleanor stood at the arrivals gate, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Marcus waited beside her, solid and calm, a steady presence in the storm of her emotions. "You okay?" he asked. "No." "Good. That means you're paying attention." She hadn't seen her son in 5 years. 5 years of silence, of unanswered calls, of grief piled on grief, until she couldn't tell where one loss ended and another began. And now he was walking toward her. David looked older, gray at his temples, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there at Walter's funeral. He was carrying a small suitcase and wearing the expression of a man walking into a courtroom, unsure of the verdict. Mom. His voice cracked on the single syllable. David. They stood 3 feet apart, neither moving. The airport buzzed around them, families reuniting, lovers embracing, but Eleanor and David might as well have been on a different planet. You look good, David said finally. Healthy. I am healthy. For the first time in years. I'm glad. He shifted his weight. I wasn't sure you'd actually be here. I said I would be. I know, but I wouldn't have blamed you if you changed your mind. Eleanor studied her son's face. The arrogance she remembered from their last phone call was gone. In its place was something she hadn't seen in years: uncertainty, vulnerability, fear. I thought about it, she admitted, changing my mind. 100 times at least. What stopped you? The same thing that stops me from giving up on anything these days. She glanced at Marcus. Someone reminded me that people can change, that they deserve chances to prove it. David's eyes flickered to the big man in the leather vest. You must be Marcus. That's right. My mother talks about you a lot, every time we've spoken these past few weeks. She talks about you too, every single day. David flinched at that. Eleanor saw the guilt flash across his face, raw and immediate. I don't deserve that, he said quietly. Probably not, Marcus agreed. But that's between you and her. I'm just the guy who knocked on her door. The drive to Eleanor's duplex was silent. David sat in the back seat of Marcus's truck, staring out the window at the small town his mother now called home. Eleanor watched him in the rearview mirror, trying to read his expression. What was he thinking? Was he judging her modest house, her simple life? Was he looking for evidence that she was still the grief-stricken widow he'd dismissed? When they pulled into her driveway, David finally spoke. This is where you live. Yes. It's nice, quiet. I like quiet now. I spent too many years in noise. Marcus helped with the suitcase while Eleanor unlocked the front door. The duplex was warm, clean, filled with photos and mementos from her new life. Pictures of the clubhouse Christmas party. A framed newspaper article about the Dorothy Initiative. A thank you card from Agnes Porter, her first senior visit. David walked through the rooms, slowly taking it all in. You've changed things, he said. Dad's stuff is gone. Most of it. I kept what mattered, but I stopped trying to preserve a museum. That must have been hard. It was. But holding on to everything was harder. Eleanor sat down on the couch. For 3 years after your father died, I couldn't move anything. His toothbrush was still in the bathroom. His slippers were still by the bed. I thought if I kept everything the same, somehow he'd come back. And now I understand that he's not coming back. And that's okay. I can love him and miss him without living in a shrine. David sat down across from her. Marcus stayed standing by the door, a silent guardian. Mom, I need to tell you something. What? When I called at Christmas, that cruel call, the one where I said all those horrible things, I was drunk. I'd been drinking since noon, I suspected. But that's not an excuse. I meant what I said, at least in the moment. I was angry and bitter and looking for someone to blame. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. But I was wrong. About all of it. Eleanor's heart clenched. Why are you telling me this now? Because I've been in therapy, since January, 3 times a week. David's voice shook. My wife made me go. She said she couldn't watch me destroy myself anymore. Your wife. You never mention her. Because I was ashamed. Ashamed of how I was treating her. Ashamed of how I was treating you. Ashamed of everything. He looked up, and Eleanor saw tears in his eyes. Her name is Catherine. We've been married for 8 years. And for most of that time, I've been a terrible husband. Just like I've been a terrible son. Eleanor didn't know what to say. For 5 years, she'd imagined David living a perfect life in California, too busy and successful to bother with his aging mother. She'd never considered that he might be suffering too. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. "Because I couldn't admit it to myself. It was easier to blame you to make you the villain. That way I didn't have to look at my own failures. And now I'm trying to look at them, all of them, the way I abandoned Dad when he got sick, the way I abandoned you after he died, the way I've been running from grief my entire adult life instead of facing it." Marcus shifted by the door. "I'm going to give you two some privacy. Eleanor, call me if you need anything." "Thank you, Marcus." He nodded and slipped out, closing the door softly behind him. Mother and son sat in silence for a long moment. "I don't know how to fix this," David said finally. "I don't know if it can be fixed. Neither do I. But I want to try, if you'll let me." Eleanor studied her son's face, the little boy who'd run through the house on Christmas morning, the teenager who'd slammed doors and shouted that he hated her, the man who'd disappeared from her life piece by piece until she was alone. "I'll let you try," she said, "but I need you to understand something first. Anything. I'm not the same person you left behind, the woman who couldn't function, who called you crying every week, who made everything about her grief. That woman doesn't exist anymore. I've built a new life here. I have friends, purpose, people who count on me. And I'm not going to sacrifice any of that for a relationship that might not work." David nodded slowly. "I understand. Do you? Because I need you to really hear this, David. I love you. You're my son. But I spent 5 years waiting for you to save me, and it almost killed me. I'm not waiting anymore. If you want to be part of my life, you have to show up. Consistently. Not just when you feel guilty. I know. Words are easy. Actions are what matter. I know that too." David wiped his eyes. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking for the chance to earn your trust, however long that takes." Eleanor looked at her son. Really looked at him. He was broken. She could see it now, the cracks she'd been too wrapped up in her own pain to notice. He wasn't cruel or cold. He was terrified. Terrified of loss, of grief, of feeling anything too deeply, just like she had been. "Okay," she said. "You can have that chance." David let out a breath he'd clearly been holding. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to make you work for it." For the first time since he'd arrived, David almost smiled. I'd expect nothing less. The next 3 days were strange and wonderful and difficult all at once. Eleanor took David to meet her community. Harold, Betty, Sam, they all welcomed him with the kind of guarded warmth reserved for prodigal sons. They were polite but watchful, protective of the woman they'd come to love. "Your mother's a remarkable person," Harold told David over chess in the clubhouse. "She saved my life, you know." "I'm starting to understand that." "Good, because if you hurt her again, you'll have to deal with all of us. And we may be old, but we're mean." David actually laughed at that. "I believe you." Ricky was the hardest to win over. The young man who'd once spat venom at Eleanor now regarded her son with barely concealed hostility. "So you're the one who abandoned her," Ricky said on their first meeting. "Ricky," Eleanor warned. "It's okay," David said. "He's right. I did abandon her. And now you think you can just waltz back in like nothing happened. No, I think I have to earn my way back. One day at a time." Ricky studied him for a long moment. "You know what I said to your mother when I first met her? I told her she should have finished what she started. I told her she should have died. David's face went white. You said that. I did. I was angry and broken, and I took it out on the easiest target I could find. Ricky stepped closer. But then I watched her forgive me. Not because I deserved it, but because that's who she is. She gives people chances they don't deserve. I know. So don't waste yours, that's all I'm saying. Don't waste the chance she's giving you. David met Ricky's eyes. I won't. On the third day, Eleanor took David to Dorothy Keane's grave. They stood together in the quiet cemetery, looking down at the simple headstone. Dorothy May Keane, 1942-2024. Beloved neighbor. She died alone, Eleanor said, on Christmas Eve. While I was at the clubhouse surrounded by people who saved my life, she was half a mile away, dying with no one to hold her hand. David was silent. That's why we started the initiative. Because there are hundreds of Dorothys out there, thousands, and most of them will die exactly like she did unless someone shows up. And you show up. I try, every week. Sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes we get there too late. But we keep trying because the alternative is unacceptable. David knelt beside the grave. I'm sorry, Dorothy. I'm sorry no one was there for you. She can't hear you. Maybe not, but I need to say it anyway. He looked up at his mother. I need to say a lot of things I've been avoiding. Like what? David stood slowly. Like I'm sorry for what I said about Dad's death. You didn't make it about yourself. You were grieving, and I couldn't handle watching you fall apart because it made my own grief feel too real. David, let me finish, please. He took a deep breath. I blamed you for being sad because your sadness reminded me of what I'd lost. And I couldn't face that. So I ran. I ran all the way to California, and I told myself I was building a life, but really I was just hiding. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face. I made mistakes too. I called too often. I cried too much. I leaned on you when I should have been standing on my own. You were grieving. So were you. And I couldn't see past my own pain to help you with yours. They stood in silence for a long moment, two broken people finally acknowledging the wreckage between them. Can we start over? David asked. Not pretend the past didn't happen, but try to build something new. That's what I've been doing since Christmas, building something new. Eleanor took his hand. And yes, you can be part of it, if you're willing to do the work. I'm willing. Then we start over. Right here. Right now. David squeezed her hand. I love you, Mom. I know I haven't shown it. But I do. I love you too. I never stopped. I know. That's what makes this so hard, knowing how much I hurt someone who never stopped loving me. Eleanor pulled him into a hug, the first real hug they'd shared in years. He was taller than her now, broader, but in her arms he was still the little boy who'd run to her with skinned knees and broken toys. Welcome home, David, she whispered. Welcome home. The months that followed weren't easy. David flew back to Sacramento, but he called every week, sometimes twice. The conversations were awkward at first, stilted, full of long silences, but gradually they found a rhythm. Eleanor told him about her visits with the seniors. David told her about his therapy sessions, his struggles with Catherine, his slow crawl toward becoming a better man. In June, Catherine called Eleanor for the first time. Mrs. Brennan, this is Catherine, David's wife. I know who you are. He talks about you constantly. A surprised laugh. Really? He doesn't talk much at home. He's working on that, Give him time. I'm trying. It's just hard. Some days I don't know if he'll ever really open up. He will. The fact that he's trying is everything. A year ago, he wasn't even willing to admit there was a problem. That's true. Catherine paused. He says you saved his life. That seeing you on the news hearing about what you'd been through, it woke something up in him. We saved each other. That's how it works. I'd like to meet you someday, if that's okay. I'd like that too. In August, the Dorothy Initiative reached a milestone: 500 seniors served. Local news covered the story, and suddenly calls were coming in from across the country. Other communities wanted to start their own programs. Other motorcycle clubs wanted to replicate what the Iron Brotherhood had built. Marcus stood beside Eleanor at the press conference, beaming with pride. "This is her doing," he told the reporters. "I just knocked on a door. Eleanor Brennan built a movement." "That's not true," Eleanor protested. "It's absolutely true. Without your vision, your persistence, your refusal to let Dorothy's death be meaningless, none of this would exist." By October, the initiative had spawned 12 chapters in 8 states. Eleanor traveled to 3 of them, speaking to volunteers, sharing her story. Each time she saw her own pain reflected in the eyes of strangers, and each time she watched that pain begin to heal. "You're becoming famous," David said during one of their weekly calls. "I'm becoming useful. There's a difference. Whatever you want to call it, I'm proud of you, Mom. I hope you know that." "I'm starting to." And then it was December again. 1 year since the night Marcus had knocked on Eleanor's door. 1 year since she'd lined up pill bottles on her kitchen counter and prepared to end her life. The clubhouse was transformed for the anniversary celebration. Not just Christmas decorations this time, but banners celebrating the Dorothy Initiative and the hundreds of lives it had touched. 300 people filled the space. Bikers, volunteers, seniors, families, all of them connected by the simple belief that no one should die alone. Eleanor stood near the fireplace, overwhelmed by the crowd. So much had changed since that terrified skeletal woman had opened her door to a stranger. "Ready for your speech?" Marcus asked, appearing beside her. "I'll never be ready, but I'll do it anyway. That's my hero. Stop calling me that. Never." She was about to respond when she saw them. David walking through the front door, Catherine beside him holding the hand of a small child Eleanor had never met. Her heart stopped. "Mom?" David's face was radiant. Surprise. Eleanor couldn't speak, couldn't move. Couldn't do anything but stare at the little girl with David's eyes and Catherine's smile. "This is Emma," David said, lifting the child into his arms. "Your granddaughter. She just turned 4. My granddaughter. We wanted to tell you in person. We wanted this to be a real homecoming." Catherine stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry we kept her from you. David was so closed off, and I didn't know how to reach out and—" Eleanor pulled her into a hug, cutting off the apology. "You're here now. That's all that matters." "Grandma," Emma's small voice cut through the chaos. "Daddy says you're a hero. Is that true?" Eleanor looked at this child, this miracle she didn't know existed. 4 years of life she'd missed. First words, first steps, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. It should have hurt. And maybe later it would. But right now, all she felt was joy. "I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just your grandma." "But you help people. Daddy said so. I try to help people. And now I'm going to help you." Eleanor reached for the little girl, and Emma went to her willingly. "We have so much to catch up on. 4 whole years of hugs I owe you." "That's a lot of hugs." "Then we'd better get started." Marcus called for silence as Eleanor made her way to the small stage at the front of the room. Emma stayed in her arms, reluctant to let go of her newly discovered grandmother. 1 year ago tonight, Eleanor began, I was ready to die. The room fell absolutely silent. I had lined up 17 bottles of pills on my kitchen counter. I had written a note. I had made peace with the idea that my life was over. She looked out at the faces before her. Betty Harold, Sam, Ricky, Marcus, David and Catherine, all the strangers who had become family. And then someone knocked on my door. A big, scary biker with tattoos and a leather vest and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. He said 7 words that changed my life. You shouldn't be alone tonight, ma'am. Marcus wiped his eyes. I almost didn't open that door. I almost pretended I wasn't home. I almost chose death over the risk of trusting a stranger. Eleanor held Emma closer. But something made me reach for that lock. Something made me take a chance. And that one choice, that one moment of courage led to everything you see in this room tonight. She looked at her son. David was crying openly, making no effort to hide his tears. Dorothy Keene didn't get that knock. She died alone, forgotten, invisible. But her death gave birth to something extraordinary. Because of Dorothy, hundreds of seniors across this country are being visited every week. Because of Dorothy, communities are coming together to protect their most vulnerable members. Because of Dorothy, no one dies alone. Eleanor set Emma down gently and reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small box and opened it to reveal 17 pills, the same pills she'd kept as a reminder of how close she'd come. These were supposed to be my way out. Tonight they become something else. She walked to the fireplace and threw them into the flames. I don't need reminders of how close I came to death. I need reminders of how good it feels to be alive. The room erupted in applause. Eleanor stood there, surrounded by love, watching the pills dissolve into ash. 1 year ago, she had been invisible. Tonight, she was seen. David pushed through the crowd and pulled her into a fierce embrace. I'm so proud of you, Mom. So proud. I'm proud of you, too. For coming back, for trying, for bringing me my granddaughter. She's going to know you now. Really know you. I promise. I know. Eleanor pulled back and looked at her son's face, older, wiser, softer than she'd ever seen it. I love you, David. I love you too, Mom. More than I ever knew how to say. Marcus appeared beside them. Sorry to interrupt, but there's a crowd of people who want to thank the guest of honor. Let them wait, Eleanor said. I'm having a moment with my son. Fair enough? He smiled at David. Your mother's something special. I'm starting to figure that out. Don't let her go again. I won't. I swear! The celebration continued late into the night. Eleanor danced with Harold to Sam's piano playing. She watched Ricky teach Emma how to play checkers. She held Catherine's hand and listened to stories about the daughter-in-law she was finally getting to know. And when the clock struck midnight, marking exactly 1 year since the night that changed everything, she stood in the center of the room, surrounded by every person who had saved her life. Marcus raised his glass. To Eleanor, who taught us all that it's never too late to start over. To Eleanor, 300 voices echoed. She looked around at the faces of her chosen family, at the son who had come home, at the granddaughter she was just beginning to know, at the community that had grown from one desperate act of kindness. 1 year ago, she had been ready to die alone. Tonight she was more alive than she had ever been, and she understood finally what Marcus had been trying to tell her from the very beginning. That the knock on the door wasn't the miracle. Opening it was. She had opened her door. She had let the world in, and the world had given her everything in return. Eleanor Brennan was 80 years old. She had survived loss, loneliness, despair, and the edge of death itself. And she was just getting started. 1 year ago, she was ready to die. Tonight, and every night that followed, she chose to live. That was the only miracle that mattered.